Who was the first person to experience the profound feeling of falling in love? How and why did we evolve the capacity to feel romantic love? Who was the first man to feel strong paternal love for his children? When did grandmotherly love become so powerful? When was the first loving gay relationship? And how is homosexual love useful from an evolutionary perspective? And ultimately, is our deep and broad capacity for love really the primary reason for humanity's peculiar evolutionary success? These are the questions we're going to be discussing in this video. It's a story all about love, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because it seems that an expanded ability to love was one of the most important developments to occur in the evolutionary history of humanity. And one of the first to happen after our evolutionary path diverged from that of chimps. We will be doing quite a lot of speculating in this video as we try to imagine the emotional experiences of beings that have been dead for millions of years. But the overall story is based on mainstream theories regarding the development of pair bonding and cooperative breeding behaviours in our species. Let's start by considering how things would have been for our last common ancestor with chimps, who lived roughly 7 million years ago. These pre-human ancestors would have been especially sociable creatures, living in close-knit groups and establishing numerous positive relationships with the apes around them. They'd have built up lifelong friendships and felt real compassion and loyalty towards individuals they liked. Mothers would have loved their babies deeply and profoundly, and babies would have loved their mothers back. But these maternal bonds may have been the only true love that our pre-human ancestors would ever have felt. They generally have felt positive feelings towards their siblings and certain other relatives, but many of these emotions might not have run deep enough to truly count as love. One thing these ancient ancestors would likely never have felt would be the feeling of falling in love, that profound and overwhelming sensation of romantic love, limerence. And another big difference would be that our pre-human fathers would probably not have loved their offspring. They'd have felt some sort of positive emotions and protectiveness towards infants they guessed might belong to them, but that's not the same as real love. And pre-human infants wouldn't have loved their fathers, even if they knew who their fathers were. There would have been much less love between relatives in general, without such close bonds between babies and grandmothers, for example. The reason for these dramatic differences lies in the different styles of reproductive relationship and parenting strategies employed by our pre-human ancestors. Because they hadn't yet evolved tendencies towards monogamous pair-bonded relationships or communal and cooperative parenting. So let's have a look at the different reproductive and parenting strategies used by our modern ape cousins to try and uncover some clues about our own evolutionary past. Gorillas tend to live in polygamous groups, where one dominant male has sole breeding rights over a harem of females, and any lower ranking males, who are usually younger, need to respect his authority, or there'll be trouble. The big male's primary responsibility is protecting the group, and although he may sometimes enjoy playing rough and tumble with the kids, it is the gorilla mothers who are solely responsible for all aspects of child rearing. And they don't really cooperate much, tending to view one another as rivals. Chimps, both common chimpanzees and bonobos, live in multi-male, multi-female groups, where both males and females will mate with various different sexual partners. Dominant or high-ranking males may try to fend off rivals, but no one really respects their possessive claims, certainly not behind their backs. And male chimps just don't seem to generally possess the level of obsessive jealousy that's required to motivate round-the-clock mate guarding. Bonobo society is especially promiscuous. Everyone's bisexual and everyone pretty much has sex with everyone else. Casual sex seems to be used for barter, for reconciliation and general social bonding. With both types of chimp, mothers are solely responsible for raising their own offspring. Chimp mums generally don't like letting anyone else hold their baby, let alone care for it. Certainly not a male chimp, father or not. Even the grandmother is usually trusted with childcare duties. If you see a chimp other than the mother holding a baby for an extended period of time, then in all probability it means that the baby has been forcefully kidnapped by a higher ranking female. We are more closely related to chimps than gorillas, so it is probable that our last pre-human ancestors lived in multi-male, multi-female groups, where no one had strict ownership of exclusive breeding rights. They'd have been relatively promiscuous, although not necessarily as promiscuous as contemporary bonobos. Mothers would have jealously guarded their exclusive right to look after their own babies, and fathers would have been perfectly content to stay out of it. That was the case until we got into pair bonding, when individuals began to join together as couples and monogamy became the norm. Pair bonding isn't common in other great apes, but there are many other primate species that practice monogamy, for example marmosets and gibbons, and numerous species of monogamous bird. We humans have never been exclusively monogamous. Most societies through history have enabled higher ranking males to practice polygamy, and lots of different styles of relationship are possible. But it does seem that pair-bonded monogamy has always been the standard for most members of our species. It's not known how pair bonding became popular with our ancestors. Most persuasive theory I've heard is that it all started with mate guarding, a common practice in the animal kingdom and sometimes attempted by domineering male chimps. The idea is that one of our male ancestors was an especially jealous individual who was prepared to mate guard full time, claiming ownership of a female and obsessively blocking her off from the advances of other males. He wasn't necessarily the nicest of guys, but he was very committed, and his strategy worked well from an evolutionary standpoint, ultimately allowing him to pass on his jealous genes to his offspring, who also went on to be successful in the breeding game, and so the possessive mate guarding strategy really took off. And soon it became normal for a male to select a not too resistant female, which he'd follow around most of the time for the rest of his or her life. Eventually females would evolve to become jealous and possessive as well, probably when they began to realise that an extra pair of hands could be useful for childcare. It's not the most romantic start to our love story, an obsessively jealous man claiming ownership of a woman. But if you've read many romance books, especially erotic romances, then perhaps the primacy of jealousy is not so surprising. Erotic romances often feature a male hero who is obsessively possessive, and this theme has been popular for a very long time, from the thousands of years old story Beauty and the Beast to the popular modern fiction 50 Shades of Grey. And the erotic classic Story of O goes especially far along the theme of possession. So perhaps this possession fetish eroticism in humans goes back to these times, when zealous mate guarding proved to be a successful evolutionary strategy. Anyways, lust, jealousy and possessiveness can be powerful motivators. but they're not the strongest bonds to build a relationship on. Being right next to someone most of the time for the rest of your life is a very big commitment. And if you're going to do it properly, then you need to be highly motivated. You need to be driven by extremely powerful emotional forces. Ideally, something like the profound emotional force that bonds mother and baby together: love. Evolutionary progress often involves taking something that works in one area and applying it within a new context. And it's not totally clear, but it seems likely that this is what happened with our ability to love. That perhaps our existing capacity to love our mothers and mothers' capacity to love their babies was expanded and repurposed to apply in the context of reproductive relationships, allowing super strong pair bonding between monogamous couples. It is worth noting that there would already have been instances of individuals feeling love outside of the strictly biological mother-child context. For example, when orphaned youngsters were adopted by grandmothers or even fathers, as has been observed happening in modern non-human ape societies. But these behaviours are probably best understood as helpful misplacing of tendencies towards maternal love. So it was a very big change when we evolved to systematically apply love far beyond the maternal context. Real love is an intensely powerful emotion, motivating individuals to pour their hearts into caring for others, and sometimes even driving them to put themselves in extreme danger to protect loved ones. Lovers feel a deep attraction to one another and a desire to stay together. They grieve in emotional agony if their loved one is lost. Limerence is the term used for the feeling of falling in love, the emotion people sometimes feel in the early stages of a courtship or a romantic relationship. Limerence is characterized by wanting to be near someone, thinking about them a lot, being especially attentive to their expressions and communications, wanting to impress them or win their approval. And significantly, there's the strong desire for one's love to be reciprocated. Love is a very extreme emotion and can be psychologically overwhelming. Loving someone is different from just liking them. It's on a whole nother level. It seems that all of these elements of romantic limerence are also present in mother-child love, at least at some stage, which makes it easy to see how all types of love may, in a biological sense, have developed using maternal love as the template. And it seems both in the case of romantic partner love and mother-child love, some of the aspects of love tend to become less intense over time. Adults generally lose the desire to follow their mothers around constantly, and lovers may in many ways become less attentive to their partner's communications as the relationship stretches into the long term. Often, intense limerence makes way for companionate love, where lovers settle into a less excitable loving state, something more balanced and stable, and more suitable for maintaining a lifelong relationship. One intriguing question is whether limerence is separate from the feelings of possessive jealousy we discussed earlier. Or perhaps they're part of the same emotional package. Perhaps love is naturally characterized by some degree of possessive jealousy. After all, there is a high level of possessiveness in maternal love, as evidenced by chimp mothers' acute defensiveness regarding their babies. Love is double-edged, and it has always had a darker side. Anyways, how did romantic love come to exist in the first place? Is it the result of genetics? Some random mutation with epic consequences? Because surely we must have some sort of genetic predisposition towards feeling romantic love. Recent studies have found genetic similarities between monogamous species who are very different from one another in other ways. It seems that genes that encourage individuals to tolerate being in close proximity to others are more active for longer periods of time in monogamous species. But there's a lot of work to be done in tracing the genetic history of love within our species and within nature in general. So, was the first lover a man or a woman? This is an interesting question. If limerence really is inseparable from possessive jealousy, then logically the first romantic lover was probably a male mate guarder. Although on the other hand, one can see how women may be more likely to be the inventors of romantic love, given that females were the ones with the more expansive pre-existing instincts towards maternal love. Whoever the first individual to fall in love was, it must have been a very strange experience, especially if they felt the dizzying and overwhelming feelings that can often characterize intense limerence. And all this in a world where nobody else understood. Nobody understood at all. Because of course the person that the first lover actually fell in love with would presumably not love them back. They wouldn't have been capable of loving them back. They simply didn't have the biological predisposition. They didn't have the genes, which is pretty sad when you think about it. So the first love story surely had an element of tragedy about it, setting the tone. But the offspring of that first half-loving union survived, suggesting the arrangement worked well on a functional level. And the biological ability to fall in love was ultimately passed on in the genes, spreading throughout the species, bringing us so much joy and so much pain. And eventually the ability to love, romantically, became common enough that a man and a woman met and fell in love with one another. Mutual love, reciprocated romantic love, for the first time in human history. This Adam and Eve, Romeo and Juliet became bonded together as a reproductive partnership, more powerfully than any human beings had ever been before. It's not surprising that evolution favoured the emotion of romantic love. For one thing, it's so beautiful and cruel, but more importantly, it is very effective. Of course, I'm romanticising the story a bit. Genetics is a very complex business, and there's an awful lot we don't know about the biological roots of love. But if you can't romanticise the first love story in human history, then you have no soul. Anyways, as these early romantic lovers bonded and formed lifelong relationships, something else magical happened. Human fathers came to genuinely love their children. Perhaps it's not surprising, really, in the context of the new system of pair bonding. Fathers in monogamous relationships could feel more secure about their paternity, which makes a big difference. And with both parents hanging around each other most of the time, along with their baby, but only one of them doing all the childcare, the way forward surely seems clear. Perhaps it started as the male's protectiveness over their mate naturally extended to protecting the baby, their baby. Helping to provide her with food during and after the pregnancy would of course mean he was also providing the baby with nourishment. He was effectively sharing food with both of them. And one can imagine this continuing after the baby was weaned. And then perhaps at some point a male hominin felt the strong urge to hold his baby and to care for it and nurture it in a motherly way. And the baby's mother, his romantic partner, loved and trusted him enough to let him do it. Or perhaps it happened in a different way. She's busily looking after the baby and he's just sitting there munching an orange and scratching his balls and generally making sure she doesn't run off with another bloke. Until eventually she gets fed up of all this and just shoves the baby in his arms and forces him to take a turn with childcare. Don't nod along to that one, you dreadful cynics. I'm sure that the first scenario I mentioned was the true one. However it happened, it's easy to see why the capacity to feel paternal love was such a successful adaptation from an evolutionary perspective, with offspring much more likely to survive when cared for by both parents. And with the success of paternal care, hominin mothers let their guard down further and began to allow others to assist with childcare, widening the circle. Childcare from grandmothers became an important aspect of the new cooperative parenting system, with older females contributing their valuable experience and knowledge to the cause of child rearing. This worked so well that many believe it led to the evolution of relatively early menopause in human women. Grandmothers stopped having their own children in midlife, which gave them more time to help look after the grandkids. And this was evolutionarily more efficient because babies got the best of both worlds. The health advantages of a young mother and the experience advantages of an older one. And these grandmothers significantly improved the survivability of babies and thus their own genes. So the system spread throughout the species. The move to earlier menopause fits within the context of other evolutions in the human life cycle. People were living longer on average, but maturing slower, with humans taking an unusually long time to reach adulthood, and children being dependent on carers for many years. This undoubtedly helped to encourage the move towards cooperative breeding and communal parenting. Young females often relished the chance to hone their parenting skills by looking after their siblings, and eventually many members of the community were trusted to help, including those with no kinship bonds to the baby. There's an old saying that it takes a village to raise a child, and perhaps you could say that this was kind of true millions of years before the first villages were even built. Because for hominins, the raising of children had become a shared responsibility for the community at large. We had evolved into cooperative breeders. This meant babies got used to feeding aspects of the mother-child bond with a variety of different carers, strengthening bonds of kinship in all directions, and also building strong emotional connections with non-relatives. Hugely expanding the breadth and depth of love within human society. And eventually the practice of political marriage would broaden our conception of kinship and family, progressing things even further. But we'll come back to discuss that another time. One significant subject that's sometimes overlooked is the question of homosexual love, because of course many people fall in love with people of the same sex. And this is a fascinating topic because whilst it's easy to see why hetero-romantic forms of love were favoured by Darwinian forces, it's less clear why homosexual love should be so evolutionarily successful. In fact, logically, one can see how such feelings might decrease an individual's chances of passing their genes on. Homosexual sex and bisexuality are common in nature. Such behaviour has been scientifically documented in well over 150 species and counting. It seems that animals engage in homosexual sex for reasons of social bonding and for fun, and most of these animals are bisexual, so also have heterosex. We'll discuss sex in more detail in a future video, but for now, this story is all about love. And there's plenty of evidence of gay love in the animal kingdom. Many animals build lifelong pair bonds with members of the same sex. In some bird species, females team up in pair-bonded couples to raise their offspring together, with the absent fathers simply donating sperm. Some male-male dolphin couples spend all their time with each other, playing, hunting, and having sex. Their strong alliance makes them more efficient hunters, raises them up the social hierarchy, and enables them to collaboratively defeat rival males, winning improved access to sex with females. When you think about it, the reason for the evolutionary success of homosexuality is obvious. Forming a super strong, love-based alliance with another individual is beneficial in numerous ways, whatever their sex. It makes the allied lovers stronger within their group, but also makes the whole group stronger relative to less loving, more weakly bonded groups. And as in the case of the gay dolphin lovers, homosexuality can actually increase reproductive efficiency when combined with a bit of heterosexual behaviour. In any case, humans added the capacity for romantic homosexual love to our growing arsenal of loving capabilities. Ultimately, we'd taken mother-child love and expanded it to enable hetero-romantic love, father-child love, grand-maternal love, and gay romantic love. We'd also broadened and deepened the bonds of kinship and community, expanding love to the ever-extending family and even non-relatives. Perhaps these abilities and inclinations evolved one at a time. First hetero-romantic love, then paternal love, etc. Or perhaps we evolved the capacity to feel different types of love all at once. Maybe some sort of genetic mutations that simply removed the mother-child context constraints from our existing ability to love, thus expanding it to potentially include anyone. After all, it seems as if humans are capable of loving non-family members platonically, and sometimes the relationship between best friends can actually be quite like a romantic relationship. Some best friendships have a similar level of fire, passion and jealousy to that seen with romantic limerence. Surely old friends can come to experience profound feelings of companionate love. Does this natural predisposition towards social positivity make us more likely to help new YouTubers by liking their videos and subscribing to their fledgling channels? Yes, it probably does make us more likely to do that. Who knows? But what is for sure is that the ability to direct our love in multiple directions has made our societies incredibly strong, with everything founded on a super solid network of powerful emotional attachments, bonding together families, communities, societies, and ultimately the whole species in one vast, tangled, interlocking web of love and care. For humans, everything is founded on love, and perhaps it sounds a bit idealistic and hippy-dippy to say it, but it is fundamentally true. It's true from an evolutionary biological perspective, it's true from a sort of chronological historical perspective, social cultural perspectives, and it's also true from the perspective of individual psychology. We humans need love right at our foundations, and children who do not receive enough love early in life will suffer from the deficit. Tragically, they'll be traumatized by it. Regarding where evolution of pair bonding and cooperative breeding behaviours fit into the overall timeline of history, this, as always, isn't entirely clear. It is likely that pair bonding came before cooperative breeding and to some extent caused it to happen. As we've discussed, it's easy to see how monogamistic behaviours might naturally lead to the development of communal parenting. It does seem that pair bonding and cooperative breeding were some of the earliest key adaptations made by our ancestors, perhaps chronologically the second and third big developments following on from the evolution of bipedalism. It's uncertain whether they came before, after, or around the same time as the development of stonework tools, roughly 3.3 million years ago. Some researchers theorize that pair bonding and cooperative breeding evolved around the time of the first homos, Homo habilis, 2.8 to 2 million years ago. But others push the date back beyond 3.5 million years, during the time of the Australopiths, before the first known stoneworkers. There's a lot of variation, but the general consensus is that monogamy and communal parenting developed between 4 and 2 million years ago. For what it's worth, I would incline towards earlier estimates, because I suspect that the advanced Oldowan tools from at least 2.6 million years ago were made by people with shared intentionality, and shared intentionality logically comes after the development of big love, as we'll discuss in the next video. Therefore, I think pair bonding and cooperative breeding evolved between 4 and 3 million years ago. It is clear that these adaptations were hugely important landmarks in human history. Some have described communal parenting as the crucial development which enabled our brain size to expand beyond what seemed to be normal biological limitations regarding the ratio of brain cells to non-brain cells. Cooperative breeding is rare across the animal kingdom. Most cooperative breeders are monogamists, and only 5% of mammals are monogamous, so it's only a very small percentage of mammalian species that practice communal parenting. These include marmosets, tamarins and gibbons, and of course wolves and dogs, animals which likely have similar capacities as us when it comes to experiencing love. They feel deep emotional attachments to multiple members of their social group. And maybe this is one of the reasons we love dogs so much, because they're genuinely capable of loving us back without necessarily needing to believe we're their mother. The point is, humans were the only one of the great apes to evolve cooperative breeding. And this approach to parenting and its effects on society, combined with our great ape brains to enable us to develop shared intentionality or super empathy. Which in turn enabled us to develop language and cumulative culture and morality, all of which we'll come to in future videos. The next video in this series is about the development of shared intentionality, our revolutionary ability to empathize with others on a profound level, our super empathy. So, thanks for watching. I hope you found that interesting. Do hit the like on the video and subscribe to the channel. That would obviously help us grow. And any comments you have are much appreciated. This is only my second ever YouTube video, so any suggestions really are helpful. Anyways, until next time, peace and love.